SpaceX is closing in on 130,000 acres of Louisiana coastline, a second mega starbase so large that today's starbase would fit into it more than 900 times. The Starship oil rigs are back. Meanwhile, at the pad that just launched Flight 13, our flyover caught something nobody expected. Scaffolding deep inside the flame trench. We dug into what's happening down there, and the answer comes with a clock attached, because the paperwork now puts Flight 14 just days away. My name is Felix. Welcome to What About It. Let's dive right in. Starship updates. Let's start in the Indian Ocean, because the recovery story we've been following for 2 weeks has taken a turn. On Friday, Elon Musk posted this. Unfortunately, ship recovery is not looking good right now. But why? What happened? Let's reconstruct it from the tracking data. The picture it paints is quite dramatic. Through Thursday night, the Normand Ranger had Ship 40 under tow and was making slow progress north-northeast. Then, on Friday morning, everything changed. Ship watchers recorded a sudden burst to 7.5 knots, and then the tow track reversed completely, crawling south-southeast at 1 to 3 knots. There is no confirmation, but a speed spike followed by a course reverse is exactly what you'd expect to see if the tow rigging failed. And sure enough, Go Australis, the second recovery vessel, turned around, ran into Dampier, and headed back out loaded with what trackers believe is additional towing equipment. Maritime historian Sal Mercogliano summed up the AIS picture. Destination fields flip-flopping, at one point literally reading Bali, with the convoy sitting 787 nautical miles from Dampier, Australia, and 799 from Bali. His verdict? More questions than answers. That is my verdict as well. And hanging over all of it, a deadline: the weather. Winds at the tow site were already gusting past 26 miles per hour on Friday, and the forecast called for conditions to turn genuinely rough at the start of this week. So now, Go Australis was recorded racing back toward the convoy to beat that window. By the time you're watching this, that weather has arrived, and Ship 40 has either ridden it out or it hasn't. We may all know the answer already, but either way, the situation that led into it deserves a proper look. Let's run the numbers. They explain Elon's pessimism. At tow speeds of 1 to 3 knots, the nearest port is between 11 and 30 days away. The weather window was 2 days, remember? You cannot outrun that math. Whatever happens, this convoy has to survive the weather at sea, re-rig, and then crawl to port over weeks with a 52-meter stainless steel vehicle that has now been floating in salt water for more than 2 weeks and was never designed to be a boat. Starboat. So let's be honest about the chances. There are really only 3 ways this ends. Best case: Go Australis arrives in time. The tow is re-rigged before the weather peaks, the convoy rides out the blow, and then crawls to Dampier over 2 or 3 weeks. Possible, but it requires everything to go right in conditions where things have already gone wrong. Middle case: the vessels stand off, let the weather pass, and re-attempt the tow afterward, gambling that Ship 40 is still afloat and towable on the other side. Worst case, and the one Elon's tone points to: the ship takes on water, the tow can't be re-established, or the weather is just too rough. The responsible end is a controlled scuttling in deep water. If you ask me, the odds lean toward the third outcome. Hope for Dampier, prepare for the sea burial. But, and this is the part the headlines will likely miss, this recovery campaign already paid out. SpaceX obtained close-up photos of, in Elon's words, critical regions of the heat shield and engines for future upgrades. The data is in the bank, no matter what the sea decides. If Ship 40 goes down, it goes down having already testified. A lot of the work behind a modern space mission now runs through AI. Planning, analysis, sifting the data nobody has time to read. Getting good at that yourself is easier than you'd think. Today's sponsor is Outskill. People open up an AI model like Claude, see the blank box, freeze, and never find out what it can actually do. Outskill fixes that. And guess what? They are running a free Claude-focused 2-day workshop this weekend, 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. Eastern. Claude is way more than a fancy search engine. It's used to build apps, design presentations, and automate workflows without writing a line of code. Learn running deep research, building artifacts and dashboards, presentations, and connectors. Use Claude Code and build your own agents. You can do it. There are extra goodies: a prompt library, Claude Code tricks, and a personalized AI toolkit builder. Bonuses worth over $5,100 if you join and attend. Grab your free seat to the 2-day Claude AI Mastery Workshop. Scan the QR code on screen or use the link below. The first 1,000 people attend for free. Now to Starbase, because we just flew over the site again with SPI helicopters, and the story this time is that the waiting is almost over. We start at Pad 1. Inside the flame trench, crews are continuing to pour the pile cap, the massive concrete slab that ties the tops of all those foundation piles into a single structural base. Everything above it will stand on this. And while the concrete goes in, look at what's staged around the pad. Most of the structural steel for the trench and for the frame of the new orbital launch mount is now on site. So are the large green water pipes for the flame diverter's feed line. That is not a coincidence, that is choreography. Because the staging gives the plan away. The moment that pile cap cures, SpaceX starts erecting everything at once, with every component pre-staged within crane reach. Months of quiet foundation work bought us this moment. From here on, Pad 1 should look different every single week. There's also a diagnostic hiding in this rebuild, and we'll keep watching it. If Flight 13 had revealed a design problem with Pad 2, we would expect the Pad 1 rebuild, which trails it, to quietly deviate from Pad 2's design. So far, the differences we can see are about construction sequencing, not design. Pad 1 is being built in a different order, but to the same blueprint. That, in itself, is a health report on Pad 2's architecture. And one more detail near Pad 1. The original Starship tower is getting a new sturdier roof, the same upgrade Pad 2's tower already received. More protection for the tower top during launches and possibly during catches. Small item, telling priority. Pad 2 honestly is the more surprising site, because it just launched Flight 13 last month and should mostly be fine, right? Instead, our flyover shows real work. Activity inside the GSE bunker and scaffolding standing inside the flame trench. So here's why that's interesting. After Flight 12, SpaceX's own documentary gave us footage from inside the diverter, and the walls showed charring and nothing else. No visible structural damage. So why is there scaffolding in the trench after Flight 13? Well, we did some digging, and here's what we found. Crews are installing burn plates on sections of the trench that absorbed higher heat loads than anticipated. And that wording matters. Not damage, but margins thinner than designed. The fix is armor where the heat concentrated, which would explain the scaffolding our cameras caught. SpaceX hasn't broken this down publicly, but this technically is a design change deviating from the original Pad 2 plans. Meanwhile, up top, work continues on the chopsticks and on the OLM's booster clamp arms. All of that needs to be buttoned up before Booster 21 can static fire. And the schedule behind it is taking shape. Ship 41 has completed cryotesting and has its engines installed. Meanwhile, in Compass, the maritime scheduling system where launch hazard areas get reserved, the Flight 14 entry reportedly points to August 20th. That entry has wobbled before. It briefly referenced August 13th, so treat it as a placeholder rather than a promise. Still, even the later date sits comfortably ahead of the end of August Elon offered on the earnings call. For once, the paperwork and the CEO agree on the months. The rollout itself, though, hadn't been scheduled when we put this episode together. No road closure for Ship 41 was on the books. The closure that did go up this week was for different cargo. A booster cryo stand making its way from the production site down to Massey's. More test infrastructure heading to the test site, which fits everything else we're seeing. The ship's ride may well have been scheduled, or even happened by the time you're seeing this. If so, the countdown we just described is already running. While we're at Massey's, on Friday, Starship Gazer caught S-43.1, our former mystery nose cone, being lifted into the structural test stand the community has lovingly named the Super Crusher. The payload-based stress testing campaign we told you about in episode 564 is now underway in earnest. Zoom out from the pads and the flyover shows the quieter revolution. The huge site extension south of the existing facilities is almost done with surcharge preloading. That is the technique where you pile tons of soil on top of soft, wet ground and simply wait, letting the weight squeeze the moisture out and compact the land until it can carry real structures. It's why this area went silent after grading, not neglect. Physics, and that clock has nearly run out. What goes on that land matters more than the acreage. This extension is about making Starbase self-sufficient for the cadence ramp. A launch site drinking commodities at 1 flight per day rates cannot live on truck deliveries. SpaceX is, for example, building an air separation unit on site, and it's now close to operational. That machine pulls nitrogen, oxygen, and argon straight out of the atmosphere. And for the fuel side, SpaceX will build a pipeline terminal to receive Starpipe, a methane pipeline running from the port of Brownsville down to Starbase, feeding a liquefaction plant that chills the gas into liquid methane that fills the tank farm. Air on one side, pipeline on the other, and the tanker truck convoys we filmed for years start becoming history. Connect this to the math we ran last episode. Every Starship launch consumes thousands of tons of propellant. At 1 launch per day, trucking that in means a non-stop convoy on Highway 4 every day forever. A pipeline and an on-site air plant aren't convenience. They are prerequisites. When we said the bottleneck conversation was moving from vehicles to infrastructure, this is what that looks like from the air. 2 quick items from Florida, because the pad mass from episode 565 is visibly advancing. At Slick 37, SpaceX has confirmed the launch tower stack is complete, and a new satellite image shows the flame trench excavated and the pedestals for the big bullet tanks in place, or nearly so. This site is enormous, and it will still take real time before a Starship launches from it, but the pace is quickening. And at Pad 39A, the chopsticks went through weight testing on Friday. The beloved water bags came out of storage, rode all the way up the tower, translated, and came back down. No problems reported. That tower looks ready for the real deal. Now let's think past the current build-out. Even with Starbase expanded and 2 Florida pads online, getting beyond roughly a launch per day runs into a problem no amount of concrete solves. Starship is loud. Really loud. At some point, you run out of neighbors willing to live next to daily launches and sonic boom events from returning boosters, and you need pads that are remote by nature. SpaceX is working on 2 answers in parallel. The first is Pecan Island. This one has climbed the ladder from possible rumor to reporting that Louisiana is in the final stages of a deal expected to be announced this month by the governor. Yes! Maybe it already has been by the time this video reaches you. The scale is hard to overstate. Roughly 130,000 acres of coastal marshland in Vermilion Parish, land tied to an ExxonMobil legal settlement, of which SpaceX would likely use only a fraction for facilities, with the rest serving as an acoustic buffer measured in miles. For comparison, Starbase is about 140 acres large. This would be a launch site with its own weather. The second answer will delight the veterans in this community. The oil rigs are finally back. Be honest, you waited for that sentence. On Friday, SpaceX sent a formal letter to the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, responding to the BOEM's request for information about using the outer continental shelf for space operations. SpaceX's position? Existing law, the Outer Continental Shelf Lands Act, already lets BOEM lease offshore sites for this. No new regulations needed, and the FAA keeps licensing the actual flights. And the letter explicitly describes purpose-built and repurposed platforms for Starship launch and catch operations. Catch at sea. SpaceX cited its Falcon booster recovery record and Starship's role as NASA's Artemis lander to make the case that offshore platforms are key to making spaceflight as routine as aviation. If you've been here a while, you remember Deimos and Phobos, the 2 oil rigs SpaceX bought and began converting years ago before shelving them as off the critical path. That critical path just caught up. Nothing in the letter names those 2 rigs, but the strategy they were built for is now in writing, on federal letterhead. Put that letter next to the Louisiana deal and you can see the shift in how SpaceX thinks about launch sites. They used to be something special you build next to a beach. They are now becoming a resource you acquire at scale. Last episode, the cadence math demanded pads. This week, SpaceX went shopping. Yay, you've reached the middle of the video. You made it. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for watching and liking the video. If you're among the 40% who haven't subscribed yet, and there was at least one video you learned something new from, it would mean the world to me if you did. It is free, and it genuinely helps more people find my channel. Want to make my world even easier? There is only one place you'd rather be, the Y Members Club on Patreon and right here on YouTube. Click the card or the join button right here under the video. You are the reason we keep doing this. Thank you so much. You rock. Our moon is something that we all know very well. We can look at it every night. But somewhere up there is a place that, as far as we understand it, shouldn't exist. It's not a crater, no vast empty fields of regolith. It is a volcano, or rather, a whole cluster of them. This is not a new discovery. It's right there in plain sight, sitting on the near side of the moon. The area is big enough to be observed using a decent backyard telescope. What you're looking at here are called Guidry domes. And by pretty much every rule we thought we understood about how the moon works, they should simply not be there. Soon our knowledge of these domes should grow significantly, because for the first time a lunar mission targets the area. The mission includes driving there and literally poking at them. It is planned for no earlier than 2028. Last week, one of the machines built to do that poking cleared a major hurdle on the way to the launch pad. A little rover is getting ready to visit one of the strangest known volcanoes in our solar system. Here's what's planned, and I can already reveal it's going to be a remarkable team effort. The mission is Firefly Aerospace's Blue Ghost Mission 3. Firefly's third attempt to land on the moon. You might remember that Firefly nailed its first landing during the Blue Ghost Mission 1. That was back in March 2025, targeting the Mare Crisium region. It was a clean landing and followed by the full planned surface mission. Firefly is not a newbie here. They've shown that they know what they're doing. Before the mission to the Guidry domes, another landing is planned for later this year, and that mission also includes a rover, Rashid 2. But let's focus on Mission 3 for now. It will fly under NASA's CLIPS program, the Initiative for Advancing Commercial Lunar Payload Services. The underlying contract is worth about $179 million and dates back to 2024. The way this mission is built is clever. It's about much more than just a lander. Firefly is flying a two-part stack for this one. The Blue Ghost lander is riding on top of an orbital vehicle called Elytra Dark. Elytra carries Blue Ghost into a lunar orbit and sends it down toward the surface. It will stay in lunar orbit, circling the moon and acting as a communications relay. A temporary communication satellite enabling the lander and rover to call home. Blue Ghost's landing site is right in the dome's area. After touchdown, it will deploy a rover and run a suite of 6 NASA payloads. The mission's planned duration exceeds 14 days, so more than a lunar day. But what makes the Guidry domes so special? On Earth, volcanoes made of silica-rich rock are the ones that deliver the biggest fiery spectacle. They receive the most attention because they tend to pose the biggest hazard to humans. These volcanoes almost always need 2 ingredients cooking in the ground: water and plate tectonics, the movement of continental plates. But the moon, it is not supposed to have either of the two. No plate tectonics and no large subsurface water pockets that allow for such volcanoes to evolve. Still, they are there. Big silica-rich domes, just sitting there on the lunar surface. It's a bit like finding a snowman in the middle of the desert. Something made it. In summer! This leads to the obvious questions. What and how? Blue Ghost Mission 3 is out to boldly go where no one has gone before to find answers, to have a closer look. One leading hypothesis is that there may have been water down there after all, at least locally and at some point during the moon's history. If this turns out to be true, it could rewrite a lot of what we think we know about the moon. The only way to find out more is to actually go there, and that leads me to the rover. It's built by a company called Honeybee Robotics. You might not have heard of them yet, but you surely know the company that owns them. Blue Origin. Yes, Blue Origin hardware is hitching a ride on a Firefly lander carrying NASA science. 3 different players, 1 little robot. Honeybee is not a stranger to Firefly's landers. 2 of its payloads already flew and worked on Blue Ghost Mission 1. A regolith sampler called Planet Vac, and a subsurface drill called Lister. So Firefly's with a partner that has already proven it can build hardware that both survives the trip and does the job it came for after touching down on the surface. According to Honeybee, the new rover just passed its critical design review. The blueprints get frozen, the reviews sign off that it is ready for the next step, building the flight version. So what is this rover actually going to do up there? It carries the mobile half of a suite of NASA instruments called Lunar Vice. The lander holds a couple of cameras to map the site and watch the rover's route. The rover carries the instruments to do the geology, an infrared and multispectral camera system, plus a spectrometer that reads the gamma ray and neutron emissions coming off the ground. The rover is bound for the southern edge of the Guidry Gamma Dome. That doesn't sound friendly. Here, a relatively fresh impact crater allows access to deeper layers of lunar rock, like a natural drill hole. What do you think? Are the Guidry domes the entrance to the lunar superstructure, or is there a large swimming pool under it all? Only wrong answers. Haha. And that's it for today. Smash the like button, subscribe for more. This is what fuels the algorithm, and this is how you can help us for free. Check out our epic shirts in your favorite Space Nerd store. Our all-time favorite Raptor engine design and countless others are there for you to explore. Click the card or the US or worldwide link in the description. History is being written in real time. If you want to catch the other historic stories from recent weeks, click the video on screen to continue the journey now. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again in the next episode.